The bell at Westbrook High pierced the humid air, signaling the start of another school year. In the heart of the bustling hallways, where laughter and hurried footsteps intertwine, the school's contrasts were on full display. The newer wing gleamed with polished floors and pristine lockers, a testament to the town's wealthier neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the older section, with its chipped paint and flickering fluorescent lights, bore the weight of decades of neglect. It was here, in room 203, that Jamal Washington lingered, his world momentarily insulated from the chaos outside. Jamal, 17, sat hunched over a desk, his fingers tracing the worn edges of his copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. The margins were filled with his precise handwriting, notes scribbled in a mix of curiosity and defiance. His chess pin, a quiet emblem of his triumph at the state championship, glinted faintly under the dim classroom lights. Yet, for all his accomplishments, Jamal often felt invisible in a school where recognition was reserved for the football team or the children of the town's elite. He closed the book with a soft sigh, his gaze drifting toward the teacher's desk. A framed photograph of Miss Eleanor Blackwell caught his eye. A younger version of her stood proudly in Harvard regalia, the words "Class of '85 and '21" etched below. Jamal's chest tightened. Harvard. It felt like a universe away, a dream too fragile to hold. As he stepped into the hallway, Jamal's thoughts were interrupted by the clipped voice of Miss Blackwell herself. Her sharp eyes scanned the book in his hand, and her lips curled into a faint smirk. "Mr. Washington," she said, her tone laced with condescension, "I hope you're not overextending yourself with that. Some paths are better suited to others." The words stung, their meaning unmistakable. Jamal's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to meet her gaze. Before he could respond, a new voice intervened. "Everything all right here?" The question came from Desmond Carter, the school's recently appointed vice principal. His tailored suit and commanding presence stood in stark contrast to the worn-down surroundings. Miss Blackwell's demeanor shifted instantly, her smile turning saccharine. "Just a bit of guidance from Mr. Washington," she replied before walking briskly away. Carter turned to Jamal, his expression softening. "Don't let anyone tell you what you can't do," he said firmly. "I've been reviewing your records. Your potential is undeniable. Let's talk tomorrow, my office after school." For the first time that day, Jamal felt a flicker of hope. The late afternoon sun stretched shadows across the cracked pavement as Jamal made his way to the parking lot. His mother, Serena Washington, waited in their aging Toyota Corolla, her nurse's scrubs wrinkled from another grueling shift. "How was school?" Jamal hesitated, the weight of Miss Blackwell's words still fresh. But as he looked at his mother, her unwavering faith in him shining through, he found his resolve. "It was good, Mom," he said, sliding into the car. "Really good." As they drove away, the chess pin on his backpack caught the fading sunlight, a quiet reminder of battles fought and won. Above the school, a billboard fluttered in the breeze, its bold letters proclaiming, "Harvard University, Veritas." Jamal didn't know what lay ahead, but he understood one thing: the game had begun, and he was ready to play. The story unfolds in Ardentia, a sprawling, fractured world where the remnants of ancient civilizations coexist with burgeoning city-states. The landscape is a patchwork of biomes, towering crystal forests hung with latent energy, desolate wastelands stretch under crimson skies, and floating isles drift lazily above an endless sea of clouds. Magic, a volatile force born from the planet's core, permeates everything, but its use has become dangerous and unpredictable since the cataclysm, a mysterious event that shattered the old world and left scars on the land and its people. Amid this chaos, technology has begun to rise, powered by salvaged relics of the past, creating a fragile balance between the arcane and the mechanical. At the heart of the story is Kale, a brooding scavenger with a mysterious past. Once a prodigy in the arcane arts, Kale abandoned his studies after the cataclysm claimed his family and left him with a cursed arm that surges with uncontrollable magic. Now, he roams the wastelands, trading ancient artifacts for survival. Kale's motivations are rooted in guilt and a desperate need for redemption, though he hides this behind a facade of cynicism. His only companion is Lyra, a sentient automaton with a fragmented memory core. Lyra, crafted in the likeness of the long-lost seraphim race, is both a relic of the past and a glimpse into a forgotten era. She is curious and compassionate but struggles with disjointed memories that hint at her creator's secrets. Their relationship is one of reluctant reliance. Kale sees Lyra as a reminder of a world he wants to forget, while Lyra views Kale as her only link to understanding her purpose. The pair's tenuous partnership is disrupted when they cross paths with Rhea, a fiery and idealistic rebel leader from the floating city of Solara. Rhea is fiercely loyal to her people, who are oppressed by the ruling technocrats that hoard the dwindling magical resources. She believes in restoring balance to Ardentia by uniting its fractured factions, though her methods are often reckless. Rhea's initial encounter with Kale and Lyra is fraught with tension, as she sees Kale's scavenging as opportunistic and Lyra as a potential weapon. However, she quickly realizes that their skills, and Lyra's enigmatic origins, could be the key to her cause. The environment reflects the characters' internal struggles. The crystal forests, with their haunting beauty, symbolize the fragile remnants of hope, while the wastelands mirror Kale's desolation. The floating city of Solara, gleaming with mechanical ingenuity yet plagued by inequality, embodies Rhea's fight for justice. As the trio journeys across Ardentia, they uncover not only the truth behind the cataclysm but also their intertwined destinies. Kale begins to confront his guilt and the potential of his cursed arm, Lyra pieces together her fragmented identity, and Rhea learns the cost of her ideals. Their motivations evolve as they face trials that challenge their perceptions of themselves and each other. What begins as a reluctant alliance transforms into a bond forged by shared purpose and sacrifice. Together, they must navigate a world on the brink of collapse, where the line between hero and villain blurs, and every choice carries the weight of the past and the promise of the future. Jamal's discovery of a cryptic note tucked inside his annotated copy of To Kill a Mockingbird set his mind racing. A single line, "The truth lies in room 107, scrawled in hurried, unfamiliar handwriting. Torn between curiosity and caution, he slipped into the shadows of the old wing after school, only to find a hidden cache of documents exposing decades of systemic favoritism at Westbrook High. The sun dipped low over the quiet town of Rivermore, casting a golden glow on the cobblestone streets as its residents prepared for the annual Harvest Festival. Among them was Clara, a fiercely independent young woman with a knack for fixing things, from broken tools to fractured friendships. Her goal was clear: to win the festival's coveted innovation prize by unveiling her latest creation, a mechanical water purifier that could transform the town's struggling agriculture. However, her efforts were complicated by the arrival of Elias, a traveling inventor with his own sights set on the prize. His charm and polished demeanor immediately clashed with Clara's no-nonsense attitude, setting the stage for a rivalry neither had anticipated. Clara's first obstacle arose when her prototype malfunctioned, spewing water across her workshop just days before the festival. Frustrated but determined, she sought help from her childhood friend, Jonah, a quiet but resourceful blacksmith who had always admired her tenacity. Jonah, however, had his own struggles. His family's forge was on the brink of closure, and he was torn between helping Clara and securing his own future. Their dynamic grew strained as Clara's single-minded focus on her invention left Jonah feeling overlooked. Meanwhile, Elias, ever the opportunist, offered to collaborate with Clara, claiming his expertise could solve her technical issues. Suspicious of his motives but desperate for a breakthrough, Clara reluctantly agreed, setting off a tense partnership fraught with mistrust and reluctant admiration. As Clara and Elias worked together, their differences became both a source of conflict and a surprising strength. While Clara's hands-on approach clashed with Elias's theoretical methods, their combined efforts began to yield progress. Yet, their partnership was tested when Elias revealed his true goal. He wasn't just competing for the prize but also scouting for talent to take back to the city. For Clara, who had always dreamed of improving life in Rivermore, the idea of leaving her home felt like a betrayal of her values. Their argument exposed deeper insecurities, Clara's fear of failure and Elias's struggle to prove his worth beyond his privileged background. Despite their growing respect for one another, their opposing visions threatened to derail their work. Meanwhile, a subplot unfolded as Jonah, feeling sidelined, found an unlikely ally in Marin, a spirited newcomer who had recently taken over the town's struggling bakery. Marin's optimism and fresh perspective inspired Jonah to consider alternative ways to save the forge, and their budding friendship hinted at something more. However, Jonah's lingering feelings for Clara complicated his emotions, especially as he watched her grow closer to Elias. The tension between the three deepened when Jonah accidentally discovered a flaw in Clara's purifier that neither she nor Elias had noticed. Torn between revealing the truth and preserving Clara's pride, Jonah faced a moral dilemma that could either save or sabotage her chances at the festival. As the festival approached, the stakes grew higher for everyone involved. Clara's determination to succeed was matched by her growing awareness of the relationships she had neglected. Elias wrestled with his own ambitions, questioning whether winning the prize was worth the cost of alienating those around him. Jonah and Marin, in their own way, began to carve out paths that reflected their evolving priorities. With the festival's deadline looming, each character faced a pivotal choice that would not only determine the outcome of the competition but also reshape their connections to one another and to the town they called home. The morning began like any other in the quiet coastal town of Brimley. The sun spilled over the horizon, casting golden light on the cobblestone streets, and the scent of salt water wafted through the air. For Clara, it was another day at her small bookshop, nestled between a bakery and a flower stall. She had just unlocked the door and begun arranging the latest shipment of novels when the sharp chime of the bell above the entrance startled her. It was unusual for anyone to visit so early, but when she looked up, her breath caught. A man, disheveled and pale, stumbled inside, clutching a weathered leather satchel to his chest. His eyes darted around the room, wild and desperate. Before Clara could ask if he needed help, he thrust the satchel onto the counter, his trembling hands leaving faint smudges of dirt on the polished wood. "You need to keep this safe," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "No one can know you have it." Clara froze, her mind racing. Before she could respond, the man staggered back toward the door, muttering something about being followed. Moments later, he disappeared into the street, leaving Clara staring at the satchel, her heart pounding. She hesitated, torn between opening it and calling for help. But the urgency in the man's voice lingered, and against her better judgment, she unfastened the clasp. Inside was a bundle of papers, yellowed with age and covered in cryptic symbols and sketches of strange machines. At the center was a map, marked with a series of red X's that seemed to trace a path through the nearby cliffs. Clara's fingers brushed over the parchment, and a sudden chill ran down her spine. Whatever this was, it wasn't just an ordinary map. The sound of heavy footsteps outside jolted her from her thoughts. Peeking through the window, she saw two men in dark coats scanning the street, their expressions cold and calculating. Panic set in as she realized they were looking for the satchel, and likely wouldn't hesitate to tear her shop apart to find it. Clara's mind raced. She couldn't stay here. Grabbing the satchel, she locked the shop and slipped out the back door, her heart hammering in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, but the map seemed like the only clue. The cliffs were a short walk away, and if the man's warning was any indication, whatever lay at the end of the trail might explain why he had risked so much to bring the satchel to her. As she moved through the alleyways, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far, every sound too sharp. By the time she reached the edge of the cliffs, the sun was high in the sky, but the sense of unease hadn't faded. Clara unfolded the map again, her fingers trembling. She had never been one for grand adventures, preferring the quiet comfort of her shop. But now, with danger pressing in from all sides, she had no choice. The map's cryptic symbols and the man's desperate plea had thrust her into a world she didn't understand, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Jamal arrived early at Westbrook High, the dew still clinging to the grass as he crossed the parking lot. The school was quieter at this hour, the usual chaos of slamming lockers and shouted greetings replaced by a calm stillness. He liked it this way, less noise, fewer distractions. As he approached the entrance, he noticed a girl sitting on the steps, her head bent over a sketchpad. She looked up as he passed, her green eyes sharp and curious. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and her hands were smudged with charcoal. "You're Jamal, right? Chess guy?" Jamal paused, caught off guard. Yeah. And you're?" "Claire Donovan. I'm in your AP Calculus class. You probably don't remember me because you're too busy solving problems faster than the rest of us can blink." She grinned, holding up her sketchpad. "I draw. You think fast. Different skills, same brain power." Jamal gave a small smile, unsure how to respond. Claire wasn't someone he'd paid much attention to before, but there was something disarming about her confidence. "Nice to meet you," he said simply, before heading inside. The day unfolded in its usual rhythm until lunch, when Jamal found himself in the library, seeking refuge from the noise of the cafeteria. He settled into a corner table, pulling out his notebook to jot down ideas for his essay. As he worked, the door creaked open, and a tall, wiry boy with glasses and a nervous energy entered. He carried a laptop under one arm and a stack of books under the other. "Hey, you're Jamal, right? I'm Ethan Patel. I run the school newspaper. Heard about your chess championship last year. Pretty impressive." Jamal raised an eyebrow. "Thanks, I guess. Didn't think anyone noticed." Ethan adjusted his glasses, his expression earnest. "That's the thing. People should notice. I'm working on a piece about underrepresented talent at Westbrook. Thought you might want to share your story." The idea intrigued Jamal, but he hesitated. "I'll think about it," he said, not wanting to commit just yet. Ethan nodded, seemingly satisfied, and left Jamal alone with his thoughts. After school, Jamal made his way to Mr. Carter's office as promised. The vice principal greeted him warmly, gesturing for him to sit. "Jamal, I've been doing some digging, Mr. Carter began, leaning forward. This school has resources, scholarships, mentorship programs, but they're not always advertised. I want to make sure you're aware of them. Jamal listened intently as Mr. Carter outlined opportunities he hadn't known existed. It was clear the man was serious about helping him succeed, and for the first time, Jamal felt like someone in the administration saw his potential. As their meeting ended, Jamal stepped into the hallway, his mind buzzing with possibilities. He didn't notice Miss Blackwell standing by the water fountain, her expression unreadable as she watched him walk away. That evening, Jamal sat on the floor of his small bedroom, surrounded by books and papers. His mother peeked in, her face weary but curious. "You've been quiet tonight," she said. "Everything okay?" Jamal looked up, his resolve hardening. "Yeah, Mom. I think it's time I start making some moves." Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the trees lining their street. The game was no longer just about Jamal's future, it was about proving that the system, with all its cracks and biases, could be outmaneuvered. And Jamal was ready to play. The next morning, Jamal arrived early, the halls of Westbrook High eerily quiet save for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. He made his way to the library, a sanctuary of sorts, where the smell of old books and the soft clicking of keyboards offered a reprieve from the chaos outside. He pulled out his notebook, its pages filled with carefully outlined plans for his essay and scholarship applications. Yet, as he stared at the blank space beneath the title, doubt crept in. Miss Blackwell's words echoed in his mind, gnawing at the edges of his confidence. Meanwhile, across campus, Mr. Carter sat in his office, poring over student files. His brow furrowed as he came across a budget report for the school, detailing the stark disparity in resources between departments. The football team had received a 5-figure grant for new equipment, while the library's funding had been slashed by nearly half. He leaned back in his chair, tapping his pen against the desk. Jamal's potential wasn't the exception, it was proof of what could flourish if the school's priorities shifted. But he knew pushing for change would mean stepping on toes, Miss Blackwell's among them. By lunchtime, the cafeteria buzzed with its usual clamor, but Jamal sat alone at a corner table, his tray untouched. Across the room, a group of students gathered around the school's debate team captain, Claire Whitman, 17, whose polished demeanor and sharp wit had earned her a reputation as a rising star. Claire caught sight of Jamal and hesitated before making her way over. "You're Jamal, right? The chess guy?" Jamal looked up, surprised. "Yeah, that's me. I heard you're good with strategy. We're short a team member for the regional debate tournament next month. Ever thought about giving it a shot?" Claire's offer was genuine, but Jamal hesitated, the weight of his commitments, school, work, and now Mr. Carter's meeting, pressing down on him. Still, the idea of proving himself in a new arena sparked something within him. "I'll think about it," he said, his voice measured. As Claire walked away, Jamal noticed Miss Blackwell watching from the faculty table, her expression unreadable. The tension between them had deepened, and Jamal couldn't shake the feeling that she was waiting for him to falter. Later that afternoon, Jamal sat across from Mr. Carter in his office. The vice principal outlined a plan to connect Jamal with alumni mentors and scholarship opportunities, his enthusiasm infectious. But as they talked, the door creaked open, and Principal Margaret Hensley, 60, stepped in. Her presence was commanding, her sharp eyes taking in the scene. "Desmond," she said, her tone formal, "a word?" Jamal excused himself, catching snippets of their conversation as he left. "Resources are stretched thin," Hensley said. "We can't prioritize one student over the rest." "This isn't about one student," Carter replied firmly. "It's about equity." Outside, Jamal lingered by the vending machines, his thoughts a whirlwind. The stakes were higher than he'd realized. This wasn't just about his future, it was about challenging a system that seemed designed to hold him back. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jamal returned home, his resolve hardening. He opened his notebook, the blank space now a canvas for his ambitions. His next move wasn't just about proving Miss Blackwell wrong, it was about rewriting the rules of the game entirely. The following afternoon, Jamal sat in Mr. Carter's office, his fingers twitching against the armrest of the worn chair. The vice principal leaned forward, his expression intent as he slid a folder across the desk. Inside were scholarship opportunities, college prep programs, and a flyer for a regional debate competition. Jamal's breath caught as he skimmed the documents. For the first time, the path to his dream didn't feel so impossible. "You've got talent, Jamal," Mr. Carter said firmly. "But talent isn't enough. You need strategy. Like chess, right? You don't win by waiting for someone to hand you the game. You've got to make your move." Jamal nodded, his mind already racing. He left the office with the folder clutched tightly in his hands, determination hardening in his chest. But as he stepped into the hallway, a familiar voice stopped him cold. "Ambitious, aren't we?" Miss Blackwell stood near the lockers, her arms crossed. Her smile was thin, her tone laced with condescension. "Be careful, Mr. Washington. Ambition without realism is a dangerous thing." Jamal met her gaze, his jaw tightening. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Blackwell," he said evenly. "But I think I'll decide what's realistic for me." Her eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, the bell rang, and Jamal turned on his heel, walking away with his head held high. The encounter left a bitter taste, but it also fueled the fire burning inside him. He wasn't just playing for himself anymore. He was playing to prove her, and everyone like her, wrong. That evening, Jamal sat at the kitchen table, papers spread out before him. His mother watched from the doorway, her face a mixture of pride and worry. "You've been at it for hours, baby," Serena said, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Don't burn yourself out." "I'm fine, Mom," Jamal replied, though the weight of the day was beginning to press on him. I need to do this." Serena studied him for a moment, then nodded. "I know you do," she said softly. "Just remember, you don't have to carry it all alone." Her words lingered as Jamal worked late into the night, drafting essays and researching deadlines. The chess pin on his backpack glinted under the dim kitchen light, a silent reminder of the battles he'd already won, and the ones still ahead. The following week, Jamal's name appeared on the roster for the regional debate team tryouts. The announcement sparked murmurs throughout the school, with some students scoffing at the idea of the chess kid stepping into a new arena. But Jamal didn't waver. He spent his lunch breaks in the library, honing his arguments and practicing his delivery. Meanwhile, Mr. Carter's support didn't go unnoticed. Blackwell's disdain grew sharper, her comments more pointed in class. But Jamal refused to shrink under her scrutiny. Each jab only strengthened his resolve, each dismissal another piece in the puzzle he was determined to solve. As the weeks passed, Jamal's efforts began to ripple through the school. A few students from the older wing started joining him in the library, drawn by his quiet confidence and relentless drive. One of them, a sophomore named Elena Martinez, shyly asked if he could help her with her own scholarship essay. Jamal agreed, and soon, the small group grew into a makeshift study circle. But the closer Jamal came to his goals, the more resistance he faced. Rumors swirled that Miss Blackwell was lobbying to have him removed from the debate team, citing his lack of experience. The tension reached a boiling point one afternoon when Jamal overheard her speaking with another teacher. "Some people don't know their place," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "It's not my job to coddle delusions." Jamal clenched his fists, the words echoing in his mind. But instead of confronting her, he channeled his anger into preparation. The debate competition was weeks away, but Jamal knew it would be more than just a contest. It would be his chance to prove, once and for all, that he belonged. As the days ticked by, the stage was set. The lines were drawn, the stakes higher than ever. Jamal's journey was no longer just about a scholarship or a dream. It was about challenging a system that had underestimated him at every turn, and showing the world that he was more than capable of making the next move. The next morning, Jamal arrived at school earlier than usual, the hall still quiet except for the faint hum of the janitor's buffer. He made his way to the library, a sanctuary that smelled of old books and possibility. At a corner table, he spread out his materials, the annotated To Kill a Mockingbird, a spiral notebook filled with essay drafts, and a thick guidebook on college scholarships. His pencil tapped rhythmically against the table as he worked, his mind racing with thoughts of the National Merit Scholarship and Mr. Carter's unexpected support. Across the room, a figure emerged from behind the shelves. It was Olivia Martinez, 17, her dark hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Olivia, the editor of the school newspaper and a fierce debater, was one of the few students who had ever taken notice of Jamal's chess achievements. She approached cautiously, her arms full of books. "Burning the candle at both ends, huh?" Jamal glanced up, surprised but not displeased. "Something like that," he replied, gesturing to his notes. "Trying to stay ahead." Olivia leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I heard about Miss Blackwell yesterday. She's been giving you a hard time, hasn't she?" Jamal hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. That's one way to put it," Olivia said, rolling her eyes. "She's been like that for years. But you're not the only one she's underestimated. I've been digging into her grading patterns for an article. Let's just say there's a lot of coincidences when it comes to who gets the top marks." Jamal's pencil stopped mid-tap. "You think she's biased?" "I think she's more than biased," Olivia said firmly. "And if you're serious about Harvard or that scholarship, you'll need to watch your back." The warning lingered in Jamal's mind as the day unfolded. In chemistry class, he felt the weight of Olivia's words when he noticed Miss Blackwell in the hallway, speaking in hushed tones to Mr. Carter. Her expression was tight, her gestures animated. Jamal couldn't hear the conversation, but the way Miss Blackwell's eyes darted toward him made his stomach twist. By lunchtime, the tension in the air was palpable. Jamal sat alone at his usual table, picking at a sandwich while the cafeteria buzzed around him. Across the room, Olivia waved him over, sitting with a group of students from the debate team. He hesitated, then stood, his chest pin catching the light as he slung his backpack over his shoulder. As he approached, Olivia introduced him to the group. "This is Jamal. He's brilliant at chess and probably the smartest guy in the school." Jamal flushed at the unexpected praise but managed a small smile. The group welcomed him warmly, their energy a stark contrast to the isolation he often felt. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't entirely alone. But the moment was short-lived. As Jamal returned to class, he found a note taped to his locker. The handwriting was neat, almost too perfect, *, stay in your lane. His heart raced as he scanned the hallway, but no one seemed to notice his unease. That evening, Jamal sat in his room, the note crumpled in his fist. He thought of his mother's sacrifices, Olivia's determination, and Mr. Carter's belief in him. The pieces on the board were shifting, and he knew he couldn't afford to back down. Tomorrow, he would meet with Mr. Carter, but tonight, he would prepare. The game was far from over, and Jamal was determined to make his next move count. The following morning, Jamal found himself standing outside Mr. Carter's office, his palms damp with a mix of anticipation and doubt. The hallway was quieter than usual, the hum of distant chatter muted as though the school itself was holding its breath. He knocked lightly, and Mr. Carter's voice called out, "Come in." Inside, the vice principal gestured for Jamal to sit, his desk already stacked with brochures, scholarship forms, and a thick book labeled College Admissions Guide 2024. "Jamal, I've been thinking about your potential," Mr. Carter began, his tone measured but earnest. "You've got the grades, the talent, and the drive. But you're going to need more than that to stand out. Have you thought about a personal statement? Something that tells your story, your challenges, your victories?" Jamal hesitated. His story? The thought of laying himself bare on paper felt daunting. "I wouldn't even know where to start," he admitted, his voice quieter than he intended. Mr. Carter leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Start with what drives you. Why Harvard? Why chess? Why literature? And don't hold back. The world needs to hear your voice, Jamal." The words lingered in Jamal's mind as he left the office, but his resolve was quickly tested. In the cafeteria that afternoon, whispers followed him like shadows. A group of students at a nearby table snickered as he passed, their conversation just loud enough to reach his ears. "Look, it's Harvard boy," one of them sneered. "Better watch out, or he might write an essay about how oppressed he is." Jamal clenched his fists, his pulse quickening. He wanted to fire back, to dismantle their mockery with the precision of a chess master. But he knew better. Words, carefully chosen and strategically placed, would be his weapon, not anger. He turned away, his silence louder than any retort. Later that evening, Jamal sat at the small kitchen table in his apartment, the glow of a single lamp illuminating the blank page before him. His mother moved quietly in the background, preparing dinner after another grueling shift. "Jamal, you've been awfully quiet," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "Everything okay?" He looked up, the weight of the day etched into his features. "Mom, do you think I'm aiming too high? Like, maybe I should just stick to something safer?" Serena paused, the knife in her hand hovering over a cutting board. She turned to face him, her expression firm but tender. "Baby, the world's always going to try to tell you what you can't do. But you've got something they can't take, your mind, your heart. If Harvard's what you want, then you fight for it. Don't let anyone, not even yourself, tell you otherwise." Her words lit a spark in Jamal, one that carried him through the night as he began to write. His pen moved hesitantly at first, then with growing confidence, as he poured his story onto the page, his love for chess, his struggles with doubt, his dreams of breaking barriers. But as Jamal worked, unseen forces conspired against him. In the faculty lounge the next morning, Miss Blackwell sat with a tight-lipped smile, a folder of documents spread before her. "I'm just saying," she told a colleague, her tone dripping with faint concern, "we need to be realistic about who gets these opportunities. It's not fair to set certain students up for failure." Her words, though subtle, carried weight. And as whispers began to filter through the school's administration, Jamal's path to Harvard grew more precarious. The stakes were higher than ever, and every move he made would have to count. The board was set, and the game had truly begun. The autumn air was crisp as Jamal stood on the auditorium stage, his voice steady despite the nerves swirling inside him. The entire school had gathered for the announcement of the National Merit Scholarship finalists, and Jamal's name was the last to be called. A hush fell over the crowd as he stepped forward, his mother beaming from the back row. Jamal glanced at Mr. Carter, who gave him a subtle nod of encouragement. The applause that followed was hesitant at first, but it grew, rippling through the room like a wave breaking against the shore. It was a moment of triumph, but Jamal knew the fight wasn't over. In the weeks leading up to this day, Jamal had faced more challenges than he anticipated. Miss Blackwell, embittered by her own prejudices, had tried to sabotage his scholarship application by withholding a crucial recommendation letter. It was only through Mr. Carter's intervention, and the support of a few brave teachers who stood by Jamal, that the truth came to light. The confrontation in the faculty lounge had been tense, with Mr. Carter presenting undeniable evidence of Ms. Blackwell's actions. She resigned the following day, her legacy tarnished by her inability to see beyond her biases. For Jamal, it was a bittersweet victory, one that underscored the systemic barriers he was determined to dismantle. Outside of school, Jamal's life had changed in quieter but no less significant ways. His evenings were now spent balancing scholarship essays, chess strategies, and part-time work at the local library to help his mother with bills. Serena Washington, inspired by her son's determination, had enrolled in an online program to earn her nursing degree. Their small apartment, once filled with the quiet hum of exhaustion, now buzzed with shared dreams and late-night study sessions. Jamal's chess pin, a symbol of his past triumphs, had been joined by a Harvard brochure pinned to the corkboard above his desk. The dream was no longer distant, it was within reach. The final confrontation came during a town hall meeting organized by Mr. Carter to address the disparities within Westbrook High. Jamal, invited to speak, stood before a crowd of parents, teachers, and students, his voice steady but impassioned. He spoke not just of his own experiences but of the countless students who had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed. "We deserve better," he said, his words cutting through the room like the bell that had marked the start of his journey. "Not just for me, but for everyone who walks these halls. Change starts here, with us." His call to action was met with a standing ovation, a moment that would mark the beginning of a new chapter for the school. As the first snow of winter dusted the town, Jamal received the letter he'd been waiting for. The envelope, emblazoned with the Harvard crest, trembled in his hands as he opened it. His mother stood beside him, holding her breath. "Congratulations," the letter began, and Jamal's vision blurred with tears. It wasn't just his victory, it was theirs. Together, they had defied the odds, proving that determination and support could overcome even the most entrenched obstacles. And as Jamal prepared for the next chapter of his life, the lessons of Westbrook High remained etched in his heart, a reminder that every move matters in the game of life. The months that followed were a whirlwind for Jamal Washington. True to his word, Mr. Carter became a steadfast ally, connecting Jamal with scholarship opportunities, mentorship programs, and even a local nonprofit that provided college application support. Jamal's afternoons were soon filled with essay drafts, mock interviews, and late nights studying for the SAT. His mother, Serena, often stayed up with him, offering quiet encouragement over cups of tea. The dream of Harvard, once distant and intangible, began to feel within reach. Yet, the path was not without its challenges. Miss Blackwell's dismissive attitude persisted, her subtle jabs and low expectations casting a shadow over Jamal's efforts. But instead of retreating, Jamal used her words as fuel. He excelled in her class, delivering a presentation on To Kill a Mockingbird that left even his peers in awe. When asked why he admired Atticus Finch, Jamal's response was pointed, because he stood firm in the face of prejudice and proved that integrity can change minds. The room fell silent, and for a fleeting moment, even Miss Blackwell seemed taken aback. Meanwhile, the school itself began to shift. Mr. Carter, determined to address the disparities between the old and new wings, spearheaded a campaign to secure funding for renovations. He rallied teachers, parents, and even students, with Jamal at the forefront. The young chess champion's eloquence and determination inspired others, and soon, the community began to take notice. Local news outlets covered the story, highlighting Jamal's academic achievements and his role as a leader in the fight for equity at Westbrook High. By spring, the results of Jamal's efforts were undeniable. He was named a National Merit Scholar, earned a full scholarship to Harvard, and was chosen to deliver the valedictorian speech at graduation. On that warm June evening, as he stood before his classmates in his cap and gown, Jamal spoke not just of his journey but of the collective potential of his peers. "We are more than the labels placed upon us," he said, his voice steady and clear. "Our worth is not determined by where we come from, but by the strength of our dreams and the choices we make to pursue them." In the crowd, Serena Washington wiped away tears, her heart swelling with pride. Carter nodded approvingly, while Miss Blackwell sat stiffly, her expression unreadable. For Jamal, it no longer mattered. He had proven to himself, and to anyone who doubted him, that he was capable of greatness. As the ceremony ended and the graduates tossed their caps into the air, Jamal couldn't help but glance toward the horizon. The future stretched before him, vast and full of promise. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he also knew he was ready. The lessons he'd learned at Westbrook High about resilience, justice, and the power of belief would guide him in the years to come. For Jamal, this was not the end but a beginning. His story was a testament to the power of perseverance and the importance of standing up against injustice. And for those still navigating their own paths, his journey served as a call to action, to dream boldly, to challenge the status quo, and to never let anyone define the limits of their potential.